there, do you think?
Yeah.
Cool. Right, hi everyone, can you all hear me okay? Yeah. Is that okay?
You can turn it off.
How do I push
Up
to
on
mute?
the wall there beside you. There's a little dial. Is it up for that?
How these things work. All good? Everyone hear me? No? Do I need to do that?
Yes, great.
That's not going to work, is it?
No, just speak up.
Oh, that's
It'll
speak
catch
louder.
you. Yeah.
Cool. All right. Hi everyone. My name's Dave. I'm here to show you a new thing I'm working on with Double-O, which is a object-oriented framework for WordPress. Now, funnily enough, I had a bit of a chat with what's your name? Sorry.
Your name?
Yeah.
Kirsty.
In the break about WordPress theme frameworks, which I've had a little bit of experience about, and I don't think this is the same thing. So if you're thinking it's a theme framework, be prepared to change your mind. It's not actually a theme framework, it's more of an application programming framework, but I'll get to that. So yeah, what is it? It's a programming framework for WordPress. It should make your themes and generally your WordPress programming a lot better, more organised. If you've ever used a framework like Laravel or HANA or CodeIgnite or something like that, you'll find it's pretty much along the same sort of lines. You'll need to be intermediate PHP. Who here is a developer and who is a designer? So developers? Yeah? Intermediate developers? Kick-ass developers? A couple of kick-ass developers? Oh, you might be right, I'm not quite sure. Okay, beginner developers. Who's like a complete beginner? Or who came to WordPress because they thought that's how the web works and that's how you do it? Oh, that's good. Okay, cool. Right, so I've been a dev for about 15 years. On my background's 3D animation. 3ds Max, probably pre-2000, was making plugins, that sort of stuff. And there's a big sort of sharing community, so a lot of people would share their code and you get to learn off other people. It's all forum-based. It was really good fun. These days I generally write a lot of plugins, frameworks, that sort of stuff. I generally tend to work on things like campaigns. So it might be in Flash or HTML, mainly big clients. I do a pretty okay amount of PHP. It's sort of, some years I'll do none, some years I'll do lots. But I write lots of JavaScript and lots of different languages, which I think generally, if you're a developer, it's good to write more than one language because it gives you a lot more sort of points of view, and you don't get stuck into sort of one thing like this is the best. So I've been writing open source stuff for probably, I don't know, 10 years or so. I contribute to lots of projects. I used to be a HANA core team member. If I'm not doing frameworks, I might write for software programs like Komodo or 3ds Max or After Effects, something like that. And these are a few of my projects, so these slides will be online, so you can check these out another time. So why have I written Double-O? What's the point? I'm pretty much just fed up with fighting with WordPress. Every time I come to build a new website, which the majority of my work is not WordPress, but if I'm doing my own projects, my own entrepreneurial stuff, I'll use WordPress because it's quick to start. But I'll just find it's a battle, and even if you buy a professional theme, you'll find there's not that much structure, or the code that's been written is actually people are doing it the WordPress way, and frankly the WordPress way is not the way to write decent code. PHP 5 is a great language. We should not be using global functions and global variables. It's basic. That's PHP 4 has been out for 10 years. That had classes. So yeah, it's an issue, and developers deserve better. So today's talk is about having a bit of preview, getting some feedback, hoping it's a bit fun. So the first bit of the talk, which I did last time in my lightning talk, was about treating WordPress like a bad relationship. So hopefully you'll enjoy this bit. And before I start, I do like a bit of a rant. If I offend anyone, I'm really sorry. The best thing is if I do offend you, come talk to me afterwards. Tell me what you didn't like or what you thought was, could be done better. And yeah, obviously I want to know how everybody actually works themselves, because I don't know how other people use WordPress. I know how the code I study and how I use WordPress and that sort of stuff, but that may not be how everyone else uses WordPress. So I'm going to start with Dear WordPress. And it's funny because I've just discovered that Matt Mullenweg has actually written his own Dear WordPress a couple of months ago. So if you want to Google this, you'll find out it's the antithesis of what I'm about to go through. So Dear WordPress, it's not me, it's you. I admit it was fun at the start, installation was a dream. You're pretty, you know, themes look fantastic, and you're smart. Editing, administration, it's all fantastic. And you have loads of friends, you know, who doesn't want a girlfriend with loads of friends? But let's face it, you're stuck in your ways, you know, the code base is horrendous. PHP techniques are from the Stone Age. It's very controlling as a framework, it tells you what to do, when to do it. Terrible habits, I mean, who actually thinks the loop is the right way to do things? No? Oh, good, that's great. You know, global variables, there's nothing technically wrong with global variables, it's just as a project scales, it makes a project unwieldy. And there's better ways to do it. There's, you know, things like the content or the stuff. It's basically because they're trying to make it easier for people to not write echo get the content or echo content or something like that. And it's just, you know, this sort of thing, it's a joke. Well, this, like my previous point, you always repeat yourself. You're indecisive. You're awkward. This is not how to extend a function. The reason why you have to write if function exists is to check if a function exists. You should be using classes and extending. And incidentally, I'm not sure if anyone's really had a good dig through how child themes work, but the child theme has to be loaded before the parent theme. And in order for a parent theme to be child theme ready, any function it creates has to be surrounded by if function exists, because the child theme is loaded in first, and if it doesn't do that, PHP crashes. So, not good. You never admit your mistakes, it's never your fault, and you'll never change, because frankly PHP, or WordPress rather, is just, there's too much dependency on plugins, the ecosystem is too huge, 22% of the world's websites run WordPress. If they make any changes, you know, it's too big of a risk. So, next, back to the relationship thing, let's talk. So where did it all go wrong? WordPress is, I think, 10 years old now, right? 2003. A lot of the original code was third party. It was kept intentionally simple for novice coders to actually, you know, become comfortable with writing code, which is a great idea. You know, I'm really up for that. I want things to be easy. But the problem is it doesn't really scale. You know, once you're building a big application, you know, making something easy, yeah, you might be saving a bit of time, but you're not, you know, in the grand scheme of things, it's a false economy. The authors, I don't think Matt Mullenweg is actually a coder. He's doing, was he marketing or something? Anyone know? No? Well, and any open source project is going to have a lot of core contributors, and there's no real sort of, you know, coding style with WordPress. It might be now, but at the time there wasn't. And yeah, there's just a lot of legacy code. So, just want to run through what WordPress actually does and get an idea of why WordPress does what it does, and whether it's a big nut to crack or a small nut to crack. Essentially, WordPress provides overall site logic. It grabs the right data and it grabs the right template. After that, it hands over to the theme. The theme is then responsible for taking that data, putting it on screen, making it look pretty, providing some context with things like, you know, links, navigation, that sort of stuff. And as developers, we spend a lot of our time in the functions, basically in the themes part of this, you know, writing functions which do what we want to do and actually making the templates look pretty. So here is, as a sort of schematic, here's how WordPress works. So WordPress loads, it does the WordPress setup, and does all these things, eventually ending up with a query, the routing, and loading the template. Then there's the theme. This is what we just discussed. And there is, thankfully, some separation here. Now, themes didn't come into WordPress 1.5, and before that, all this was tied together. So, yay WordPress 1.5, and yay separation of consent. The next thing after the theme is loaded is you might load your, you know, whatever template it's been routed to, and that's a mixture of presentation, logic, and functionality, which, from the outset, seems like a good idea, but actually, it's a big issue because it's not really. Back here you've got your separation of concerns, but all of a sudden, back in the template, we're suddenly throwing presentation, logic, and functionality into one big PHP file. So, I don't know, this is not going to be viewable, is it? Can you guys see that okay? Yeah. So I'll do a bit of pointing. So this is the 2012 attachment template file. So right at the top we've got get header, then we've got our lovely loop. Everyone loves a loop. We come down, we've got some post IDs, some H1s to store presentation. We're doing the title, so annoyingly that's doing the thing I hate in WordPress where it echoes stuff for me. We're now into trying to display an attachment, so all of a sudden we've got a massive chunk of logic here. We're doing the label function to get the attachment metadata. We're then doing the printf, which is us saying we want to echo now, and we want to echo all these arguments through this string, which is a really long string, which is HTML, and it's not even in HTML, it's actually tied up inside PHP, and it should actually be outside PHP in the template. And then we've got, we're mixing up escape URL, escape HTML, we're grabbing some metadata variables out from this thing earlier on. It's just a bit of a mess, really. And then down through the rest of the thing, one particular template of a bunch of templates you can get. It's all, PHP, HTML carnage, everything's mixed up. It's not good. So, yeah, this was supposed to be easy for beginners, right? This was the whole point about WordPress. Let's make it easy, let's make it accessible. It's not really fulfilling the current promise. So, back to our relationship analogy, we need a bit of space. I've had enough of you, you've had enough of me, let's take some time out. And luckily for us in computer programming, there's something called a design pattern. Who's familiar with design patterns here? Oh, that's a pretty good spread, that's good. Sweet. So, called MVC. Now, one of the things with design patterns is they're a bit esoteric. For beginners, it's a bit like, well, is it code? Is it a theme? What is it? It's more of a guideline, more of a, if you want to make things easy, this is, a way of working which people discovered over the years which will suit your particular problem. So MVC is one particular design pattern, and it's designed to separate data, presentation, and logic. So the controllers manage the logic of your application, models encapsulate data, and the word encapsulate is really important because WordPress is essentially lots of global variables, lots of global functions, and then whenever you have a function, if you want to take that variable, you write global on top of it, and then it's visible to that function. And then finally, the views, they manage the presentation. So we've got controller for logic, models for data, and views for presentation. If you take those three things, you can pretty much create an app where there's not much, well, I'm get back to the slide, but you don't get the slide like I showed earlier on where everything is in one place. So yeah, jumping into WordPress, let's see how WordPress handles MVC at the moment. There's actually no access to the root or the template loader. You can, access the routing and template through filters, but I have big issues with filters. I think filters are pretty much a hacky way to do, well, actually a lot of functionality which could be done if you had a decent application structure. Yes, they work. Are they good? I think they're good in certain aspects. I think in other aspects they have drawbacks. I suppose that's programming in general. There's no formalized model methodology in WordPress. You have value objects. So, for example, if you query the database for a post, you get back a post object. But the post object is essentially dumb data. It's just an object with values. And to do anything useful with those values, you need to run those values through another function. And because everything is global in WordPress, how do you know what that function is? That function could be, do something with post. It might be, do something with tag. You're back to the codex and actually trying to find out what it is. And finally, as I just said a minute ago, views is a mashup of logic and presentation. So, does anyone know what this is? Is that nose all round? Okay. This is the model view controller design pattern. I'm just going to let you drink that in for a couple of seconds and behold its beauty. It's possibly one of the most useless diagrams ever. It basically explains what I've just said, but not very well. A much easier way to explain it is this. So on the left-hand side, you've got the browser or the user. You make a request. That comes into the controller. The controller then goes to the model. So if it's WordPress, this might be, say, get my 10 latest posts. The model delivers the post back to the controller. The controller then hands those posts to the view. which is your template essentially. The template then combines the post with your presentation, hands it back to the controller, who eventually hands it back to the browser, which is you, and you see your finished website. Or here's another way to look at it. Request a page, ask for posts, return posts, send posts to view. The view will may do something else. It might go back to the model and ask for a bit more data, so perhaps it used to display an attachment from a post. But finally, when the view's finished all that, it will return the output, and eventually the rendered view will be served. So a quick recap: controllers give a single access point rather than 10 global access points. If you looked at any theme, you've got a whole bunch of templates. Most templates are pretty much a repeat of other templates. Model functionality is declared once, but it can be used multiple times across views. Views become easier to design. So as I said a minute ago with that huge template, if your template's not full of logic, it's actually much easier for designers to write the HTML to design the template. And as a programmer, your logic will be contained either in the model or the controller, so you only look at those files. Themes, if you're a theme developer, it becomes much easier to actually build a theme because you know where everything is. You're not, sorry, that's not the point. Sorry, so your templates will be light, so you can swap templates out quite quickly, which I'll demonstrate later. Quick bit of object-oriented recap. PHP 5 and object orientation makes a lot of best practices for WordPress redundant because you don't need to worry about if function exists. Everything. We're basically using classes, not labels, and these are all tried and tested methods which are being used in a lot of larger frameworks like Zen, Symfony, etc. So I was going to do some code here, but I think I'm going to skip it. I might do.
We have a peek.
Yeah, this isn't a peek at framework code. This is actually was going to be a peek of a basic MVC app. So, anyone interested in that?
Yeah.
There's a few. Okay, cool. So, right. So, this is. Oh, hang on. Sorry, folks. This is what I like going somewhere. Application, great. So, WordPress is kind of MVC. It does have a controller. The controller is what's known as a front controller. And what that means is when you go to the website, WordPress will look at your URL, and if you've got something in there like, I don't know, category, I don't know, let's say fun or something like that, it will take the parts of your URL, which are often called segments, and it will map those segments to bits of code. So for example, let's have a look here. I'm going to go, this is a little very quick demo setup. Person. So you can see down the bottom that all this stuff has immediately changed. A minute ago, our app didn't have anything. So we've got our application, we've got our root. Now the root, can you see my mouse? I'll call you that. So the root, so controller method values, this represents what's up here. This is how the application knows what you want to see. The controller is responsible for containing the data and also taking the view, combining the view with data and echoing back at the user. So let's go to our first segment, which is person. So you can ignore this error, that's just right, it's 950 lines. So application object, that's the top of the whole application, so you can imagine that's WordPress, if you will. There's our root, so you can see our controller is, so our method is person, which maps to that. And at the moment there's no values. However, the controller has been instantiated to actually handle, the logic for all the entire thing. So if this was WordPress, that might be the template loader. So the query would happen, the template loader would kick in, it would load your template, and you'd have a whole bunch of data, which would be your posts. So in this case, I'm dragging some data out of a CSV file. So you can see that the data is, it's a list of 5 elements. Because it's person, is obviously people, so people, their name and greeting. But currently nothing's happening because we've got the root, we've got the controller, we've got the model. You'll see the view is still empty. It's resolved a template here. So mvc.com templates person, because that maps to that again. But there's no values. So let's go and enter a value. This is a bit of an aside really from WordPress. It's just more to sort of get the idea into the idea of using classes and that sort of thing. So Steve says yo. So we've got the person controller, value of 1. That's come from here, and that's basically talking to the controller. Then has the model which gets loaded in anyway, and then it hands works out that the ID to pull is 1. Goes off to the values in the model. So bear in mind this model here, the view never actually does anything directly with the data. The view is handed the data by the controller, and our result is combines the two to say Steve says yeah. Okay, this is why I didn't want to do live coding, because it's kind of, is anyone getting this?
Yeah.
Yeah, is it all right?
Yeah.
Tell me if it's not. And the actual code behind all this is pretty easy. So the application is 30 lines. The routing is, which basically converts the URL into objects, like the controller, whatever is 20 lines. The controller is 20 lines. The model is 20 lines, and the view is about 20 lines. I'm not sure if that helps the overall talk actually. I might use it out next time. So let's move on to the framework. Now, that is what goes on behind the scenes in the framework, but actually as a framework user, you probably will never ever need to touch that. What's important is if you are like a bit more of a hardcore developer and you do want to access that sort of thing, you can. At the moment in WordPress, none of that's available to you. You just can't get to it. So it's an application framework. This is the last pun, by the way, that was the first slide. No more relationship puns after this. It works on top of WordPress. It's PHP 5, it's MVC. It's entirely class-based. You will not write any global functions or variables in the framework. And there's transparent extension. If any of you are, if you use other frameworks, you'll probably know what that means. And the templates are logic-free, so it basically means it's easy to update. And there's a templating language built in. So currently, I'll take you to demo a bit more code today. I'm not there yet. It's everything runs, it's fantastic, it looks great. There are some issues with working around some WordPress issues. It's not that extensible. There's a few trade-offs between making it easy and making it good, and there's a lot of legacy code, to work with. So maybe if you are interested in this kind of way of developing, keep track of the project, and hopefully next sort of month or so something will be up. So let's go through the basics. So it's a plugin. It runs the plugin. You install it like any other plugin, and you can use it in anything. Your themes folder will look like this. So you'll have assets. You'll have config, because basically most of your theme will be set up using a single config file. So rather than throwing everything into functions PHP, there'll be a set config file, and that will do things like set up your post formats, set up your assets. So instead of thinking queue asset, you just stick it into an array. Next, there's a logic. Often you won't need to use the logic because it's all built into the framework. But if you do want to extend the framework and add your own functionality, that's where you'll do it. And then templates. Templates is pretty much where you'll do most of your work in the framework. It's just like WordPress templates, but you'll have a lot less PHP code and it'll be much more markup. That's a slightly expanded view, so you can see how it works. like I said a minute ago, that inherits from the plugin folder, so you often won't need to write any logic yourself at all, but you can do if you want to. The plugin folder is pretty much where all the magic happens. So you've got your admin, classes, controllers, models, views, and this is, I mean, there's, I don't know how many lines of code there are in here, but it's essentially you've got WordPress and you've got this application framework sitting on top of WordPress, and then you've got your theme sitting on top of that. Everything in Double-O is a class. So rather than having lots of global variables, if you want a new post, you just make a new post. And you can access methods on that post, you can access properties on that post. For example, if you were to go and, if you just get post images, you could then grab the thumb image from the post and echo its URL. This is the object model for Double-O. So up here on the controllers kick in behind the scenes. You'll never really need to worry about this, but you'll be spending most of your time will actually be the models. So all models inherit from a base model, and models can be put inside collections. And this is actually one of the reasons why views will end up being so light, because most of the logic for actually putting things on the screen is contained within models. We never really need to put anything within a template because, as I said earlier on, it's a bad place to put your PHP. There are constants for key values, so there's no point, do you really need to run a function called isSingle? It's too late. Single has been decided. Why would you need to run a function? There's no extra logic to be done. Everything in the framework is a configuration file. Sorry, I'm going to rephrase that. All the setup in your framework will be in config files, rather than throwing everything into functions PHP. And there's a few reasons for that. One is a lot of this stuff can be abstracted. Number two is it provides a structure which all developers can then come and look at, and or anyone, even a beginner, can come and look in your config file, and they'll say, okay, there's his assets, there's his post formats, there's his filters, there's his actions, as opposed to looking through a massive functions PHP file. Eventually, all these values, if you've got a child theme as well, they all merge into a single config file, and once that's in one config file, then the application can load, and all the settings are set. So. This is a bit technical. I should maybe skip this. So, how WordPress works is essentially it routes your URL, loads your template, and you don't really get much input into that. That's just how WordPress is done. Your template has to be named a particular way. It has to be in a particular folder, and it's fine to an extent. But actually, if you do want to build something a little bit more imaginative, you have to pretty much do it the WordPress way. Double-O lets you access the main query that's actually exposed as part of the framework, even though you can do it in WordPress as a filter. The template hierarchy is exposed as one configuration file, so you can pretty much change the config hierarchy, you can do whatever you want with that. And every single part of the application setup is extensible, so there's no more hacking the core, there's no more working out what's loaded, when do I need to add an action, when don't need to need an action. The main stuff is right there in the controller when you set things up. So there's is everyone aware of the template hierarchy? Yeah. So this is it in one file. If you want to change things, just jump in there and change it. If you want to change how the front page loads, change it in the config. If you want to change how somebody accesses a category, do that. At the moment, this is how WordPress takes everything in. So you've got multiple top-level templates, and you've got multiple includes. It's from a sort of containment point of view, it's pretty mucky. Double-O does things like this. The application logic that you see here, that's kind of hidden. You don't really need to worry about that. All you need to worry about is a top-level template. So you have your instead of pulling in, head, header, footer, you just put it into one template. And then the content, this is, if you were in WordPress, these will be your normal templates. They're much simpler, they're much smaller. You just literally just put the the basics of what you need, rather than including your head and the footer and everything, use template. I might skip this actually, I think it might just be too dry. Yeah, so I think I showed you this a minute ago. This was the WordPress Lifecycle. This is the Double-O Lifecycle. So you'll see it's set up configuration and plugins. That's what WordPress does. And then Double-O handles the application, query, routing, and template. And that's because all this bit is extensible. If you need to change this, you can. Plus, you have an API and a whole bunch of classes which you can access. The theme functionality is next. Now, this is the logic for a theme. This is all going to be a bit esoteric until you get your hands on the code, unfortunately. And then finally, it's the presentation. So this is where it's views, models, and templates. But the idea is the logic for everything is contained in this bit, and the presentation is contained in this bit, and there's not too much overlap between the two. So the big mucky templates that you saw before should be a thing of the past. And essentially, yeah, this is what you might refer to as your theme. The framework's up on the left. You don't really need to get too much involved with. So this is our network diagram a minute ago in WordPress. This is it in Double-O. All the functionality is in models and the views, and the presentation is just in the template. So templates will no longer contain much logical code that runs. It should just contain markup, and that's pretty much it. Everything else, all the functionality should be in models and views, and they pass the templates the values to put in. And that's really cool, because that means you can change your templates very easily. So you could do, really, really fun stuff, and you just don't need to worry at all about changing any of the functionality in here, which will mean if you make a new theme or need to make changes or need to migrate a theme to a new client, you can pretty much do it in a couple of hours, not a few days. So views and templates, where the magic happens. Views are PHP classes. They contain all the logic in PHP needed to populate a template. It's essentially a source template, model data, and rendered output. There's a whole bunch of functionality built into views, and they're extensible, so you can create your own components quite easily and just pass them to views. And those components, let's say you want like a video component, you just go PHP class video, and then you put your methods for your video, rendering, maybe getting the attachments, that sort of stuff. Not attachments, sorry, getting the dimensions, and it's just one class. And these can be nested, and then all output of the entire site is ultimately, if you imagine sort of Russian dolls, right from sort of views containing some views, all that goes back up to the top. So these are your view classes. Sorry, designers, this is probably a bit dull for you, but if you are sort of more of a framework developer, this will be kind of obvious. The majority, so it comes from a simple component. That's a basic component. Path, data, source, input, output. You can customize the tags. We'll get to that in a minute. Component, that's the next stage up, and that just has a few more things like logging. And then finally, it's your view class. So you'll see on the right-hand side, there's all these things like do. So there's lots of do properties. Now these do properties relate to, when we get to the template, they mirror tags. So if you've got something like an action tag, this will tell the view to go and do that action. If you've got a global tag, you can grab a global variable. So describing the page layout, you've got your templates. So the standard PHP files should be mainly markup, but they also contain tags. And the tags, like I said a minute ago, they map to physical functions. So you can call functions, load nested views, whatever you like. You can, in the tags, you can, sorry. So I was talking about a video component a minute ago. You can easily just instantiate your video component from essentially a dumb template by using a special tag that you write yourself. So this is an example of a template file. You see there's pretty much not that much PHP there at all. There's a couple of bits. If you want to use it, you can. So you can break out of HTML But a lot of it is just going to be template tags like this. So you can say site description. That will bugger off to your site model, pull out the description. If you want to load a view, you use a view tag. You just simply put the path to the view, and then that loads a view class, which in turn, loads in this template. Yeah, so that was back to the 2012 attachment template. This is the main index template for your theme when you're using Double-O. This is an attachment template from 2012. And hopefully this is where it will begin to make sense. This is a Double-O attachment template. So it's tiny. And the reason for that is when it says image, that's actually referencing an image model. And I'll get to models, oh Jesus Christ, I'll get to models in a minute. But, yeah.
We're sorry, we've got like 5 minutes till we get kicked out.
Oh really?
Yeah.
Jesus, sorry.
It's alright.
Didn't time it. I think we're doing good actually, we're not too far away.
Just to let you know.
So the image tag there actually behind the scenes, so you've got your view class, and then that's all PHP. And then inside the view class, you've got your dumb template. But when this gets loaded in, the class recognizes the image tag and says, okay, I need to go and get the image model, pulls the image model back, and then can render it straight into the view. I'll race through this. So there's tons of things you can do. So you've got basic values, globals, site model, WordPress options, get string. You can make direct function calls, bang in your markup. You don't need to escape out of PHP. You can just put the tag in, and it'll go off and do it. You've got your own. You can use files or views or components. It's all built in. And there's special stuff like you can have an undefined value. Translations are built right in. No more escaping out and doing a translation. You can escape right into tags. You can even use variables if you see down here. So anything in square brackets. If there's a file variable, so it might be path2, and that might say something like video. So I'm going to erase through it. So model selection, just put the hard work down. Blah 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 blah. So a model essentially is it's where the grunt work happens. It's where all your PHP will be. No more in your view, always in the model. I'm going to erase through this. Models can be put into collections. Collections themselves can be dumped into the view. Oh yeah, this is the best bit. All models can render. So if you dump a model straight into your view, there'll be code inside the model which will basically say, oh, I'm about to be rendered, and that will then return HTML. I think we've done that bit. Yeah, I'm going to race through this one. Give me like a 2 and a 3 key here. 3. Thought so. So that's pretty much a model hierarchy. So once you get on the framework, you'll be able to get access to all these things. And the models essentially inherit from each other. So you've got like a standard model. So anything can be a model. You can make your own model. That's your post object model. That's your post model. And that's your page model. And you'll see the page model has methods which the post model doesn't, because obviously posts can't get children, posts don't even have children. If you want to extend this functionality, you just make a new class and you extend it, so there's no more function exists. Oh god, actually quite a big time. So that's models in a nutshell. Finals debugging, what happens when things go wrong? Well, the framework's written so when things go wrong, it pops up what's gone wrong and why it's gone wrong. You also get a call stack. So you can walk back through all the methods which have been called, work out what value was passed through and why, maybe where the mistake was made. In your templates, it will echo. So if you've got an issue in your template, it will echo out. Echo out the template, and this thing here where it's gone yellow, you can actually click this, and it'll open the template file in your IDE, and then to the line, which is pretty cool. And then finally, there's logging. So all the core classes, everything logs what it's doing at any single time. So you can go back and see what was done, why it was done, and go from there. I think that's it really. So I'm going to leave you with some wise words from Mr. Jimmy Carr, which is pretty much my feeling about WordPress, which is you can't polish a turd, but you can roll it in glitter. That's it. overly long.
Unfortunately, we don't have time for questions. Are you coming to the pub?
Yeah.
Oh, it's
Oh, sorry.
cool. So if you have any questions, if you find us in the pub, actually I don't need to. It's fine. So I just want to say a few words of thanks to Kirsty and Dave for their great talks. Forward and Campaign Monitor for sponsoring.